Well, Trot, we're in it now. First day of the Deshaun Watson disciplinary hearings happening today, as we see the headline from Mike Florio, hearing starting today. Former federal judge Sue Robinson overseeing the process. Deshaun Watson appearing in person, represented by Jeffrey Kessler, the NFL union. The NFL has its lawyers. Lisa Friel, the lead, essentially investigative officer for the NFL, is there. We are in it. And I got to tell you, it was interesting. I was on the phone last night, had a chance to talk to someone that was involved from the league's vantage, and they said, you know, this could have been wrapped. Like, this is something that we feel like when the two sides were talking last week, really kind of leading up into this, the NFL said to the union and to Deshaun Watson, floated the idea that, you know what, a 1-year suspension. We'll give you a 1-year suspension, but it will be finite. Once that suspension's over, you come back into the fold, you serve out the 12 months, the calendar year, and we move forward from this. Hard no. Hard no from Deshaun Watson, hard no from his camp, hard no from the union. There was no way they were going for that. And from what I understand, that upset the NFL. I think they were unhappy about that. And so the response was, okay, you don't want to take a 1-year finite suspension? We're going to recommend it's a 1-year open-ended suspension. In other words, for you to even get back in the league after that year, now you got to apply. You have to meet some standards to come back into the fold. So something that clearly I think the NFL felt like they had reached what they thought was an equitable period of time that Deshaun Watson would sit out. He did not like that, and I guarantee you the fact that his contract would have told and he essentially would have lost $40+ million in salary played a part in it.
You know, Charles, there are 2 points to this. Number one, for Deshaun's camp to accept a 1-year finite suspension means that you trust that at the end of that 1 year, that suspension will be up. Let's say, though, that other information was to come out during the course of this suspension, and the league would then say in its own quarters, we've got to do something about this. What is to prevent the league then from coming back and saying we have new evidence, and any discipline now that we hand out in addition to the 1-year suspension, this is something different, and therefore we are going to extend that suspension. I'm not saying that's what would have happened. I'm just saying you try and cover all bases if you're Deshaun's camp. But the thing that's more interesting to me here from the NFL standpoint is if the league, let's say, got mad that Deshaun didn't accept the 1-year finite suspension, what the league has now done then, if this is true, is set up a potential scenario where now this drags out beyond next year because Deshaun is going to have to come after a year, apply for reinstatement, and now the whole story is brought up all over again. And the people who are upset that he's even playing, period, are going to be, hammering the league again. So I think the league needs to be careful here in terms of, that old cliche about cutting off your nose to spite your face. Because if you want to move past this, and I have to believe that the league wants to move past this, if you give him an indefinite suspension, you've basically opened this up again to be relitigated in the public forum, if you will, a year from now.
I think, too, what's interesting, again, to the people I've spoken to, I think if the league had come to the table and said 9 games, 10 games, I think the union's lawyers would have told Deshaun Watson, we think you should take this. Like, we think this is gotten into a zone where you come back during the 2022 season, 9, 10 games, you're not going to be happy sitting out. The Cleveland Browns obviously aren't going to be happy with that, but we believe that you should take that number. And I think they were hoping once the two sides started talking that that was a zone that the NFL would ultimately land in. My question for you, Jim, is how do we, when we talk about him applying to come back, right? If you are setting up a process where someone has to ask to be reinstated, it means you're going to have to meet some standards. So now I think the question is, say this goes through the disciplinary process. The league says we want the open-ended year, we want 1 year, and then he's got to reapply. Say that Sue Robinson looks at it and says, yeah, you know what? I think that based on all the evidence I have in front of me, the data, the contemporaneous evidence that's involved with the 5 women, that the narrow scope of women that they're looking at, what then becomes the standard? How does the league decide, okay, he's going to apply for reinstatement. Here's what we believe he has to meet. In your mind, what does the NFL lay out for Deshaun Watson and say, here are the thresholds you're going to need to meet to get back into the NFL?
You know, Charles, it's a great question for which I have no answer, to be quite frank. From this standpoint, look, Deshaun has already said publicly that he is going to counseling. So he, again, has maintained over and over that he has done nothing wrong, but he is seeking to improve himself, and therefore he is going to counseling for something. Don't know what that is. So his camp could make the argument that he is already taking steps to try and learn from this, so to speak. I don't know what those steps would be. I mean, you go back to past precedent, and the only case that I think is somewhat similar, if you will, is we talk a lot about Ben Roethlisberger, who initially was suspended 6 games. It was appealed down to 4. Did the league require Ben to undergo any sort of counseling, any sort of community service? I mean, I don't know. I'm spitballing here. So I don't know what the league would require of Deshaun in such a situation. And that's one of the dangers here if the league does say it's going to be an indefinite suspension, because then the question will become, by some, has the league done enough? Did it require enough for Deshaun to come back? And now you've put yourself in an awkward position again. And that's why, if you can just have it clean cut here are the number of games. Once that's up, you know, you'll be free to return. But again, if new evidence comes out in the course of this, what's to say that the league says, you know what, we didn't have this information when we handed down discipline, and therefore we feel that this is something new, something different, something more severe, and therefore we need to go back and address it again.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.